Richard, we're happy to have you here and thank you for being here. Richard was elected NZ CTU President in 2015. He was previously the New Zealand Combined Trade Union's Vice President and one of 2 National Secretaries of the Public Service Association. Richard began working as a full-time paid union official in 1988 as a researcher. Later he became an organiser working in Auckland with PSA members in the health and disability sectors. In 1997, Richard was appointed as a National Operations Manager responsible for PSA members throughout the country in the health and community sectors. Richard took up the position as National Secretary of the PSA in 2000, which he held until becoming CTU President in 2015. As National Secretary, Richard was responsible for overseeing the implementation of the union's industrial and political strategies and operations for New Zealand's largest trade union. Welcome tonight, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Ena mana, ena rio, ena karanga tangamaha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm looking at my watch because I can see time's of the essence, so I'll try not to take too long in getting to the point, which is I wanted to talk to you about, and I've been asked to talk to you about worker engagement and participation, obviously from a union point of view. Essentially, and before I do that, I want to sing out to Safe Rebuild and thank you for your work and acknowledge the fantastic work of Joe, of Bernard, of Etu and the team, and also I want to sing out to Libby Carr, the Charter Officer, since I've got this chance. For the CTU, we often think health and safety boils down to 3 basic things. We talk about a 3-legged stool. In other words, if one of these things isn't working, it isn't going to work. We think there needs to be decent law and a strong regulator. We think there needs to be obviously a decent management approach and decent leadership, and we think there needs to be strong worker participation supported by unions. And we certainly think that if you look at, in a way, the seminal event for our big wake-up call, Pike River Mine, it certainly did demonstrate how those things weren't working well. And I think the independent task force on health and safety well and truly brought out those issues amongst a dozen others, but poor worker engagement was a major one. And I know through talking with the union that was present, there were people who wanted to speak out, the union wanted to speak out, there were individuals who wanted to speak out, but they felt they worked in a culture where it was hushed up, where production mattered more than anything else. And I still get that when there are tragedies in New Zealand. Sometimes I'll get phone calls from people who go, yeah, we ticked all the boxes. We got our safety briefing in the morning, but we went out there knowing full well that production was the only thing that really mattered and the speed of production. And everything else was drowned out. So how do you balance those two, I think is a real challenge for us all. I'm going to talk briefly about the Act, but I don't want to get stuck on that because I don't think the law will do it. But actually in the law, there are strong rights for working people. There is a right to be engaged with anyone who does or could be affected in workplace health and safety. And I haven't got the list up there because it's long. It's a right to be consulted on pretty well hazards, risks, elimination, minimisation, change, information process, the whole lot. There's a long list of things that workers have a right to be consulted on. There's a right to participate, and PCBUs must have practices that provide ongoing and reasonable opportunities for workers to participate. Okay, sounds fine, but I would argue big deal if it says that in the law. How many people read the Health and Safety at Work Act every day? None of us. I certainly don't. Because it's the law. It doesn't mean it's what we do, it's what we're meant to do. And finally, of course, workers do have a right to representation. They can have health and safety reps and health and safety committees, and of course they are allowed to join a union for further support if they wish to. But the law's one thing, practice is another. The Act actually does talk about engagement, and it says basically, it can be read as having some basic steps that, according to the law, you're supposed to give information to your workers if you're an employer or a PCBU. You're supposed to give those workers an opportunity to respond to that information. You're supposed to take those views into account when you make a decision, and then once you've made a decision, you're expected to tell your workforce what decision you've made if you're the boss. That, to me, is very last century. That's how consultation used to be. And it's certainly enshrined in a lot of industrial union agreements, collective ones, from the 70s and 80s. It's actually in a lot of individual agreements, not even that exists. But for me, that's not engagement. That's a very much top-down, specified one where people basically, they just respond if they feel like it, but it's out of their hands. And what I'm looking for, and what we're interested in doing, is going further. We think the Act actually means to say, because when the Act was brought in, and certainly the CTU had quite a few animated discussions with the Minister about the changes that were coming in. We were really hot on this worker engagement bit, and certainly Minister Woodhouse said, well, we need a change in culture. We just need a health and safety culture to grow, and yeah, culture sounds good. We don't want so much tolerance. We want more focus on health and safety. We want people just to act differently. And in my experience, I think culture is incredibly important to organisations, but you can't just read about it or put out a memo and say, we're just going to change the culture from now on. Let's just be different. It doesn't work. It won't work. I think the Act certainly would strongly support a change in culture, but it should be read, I think, to mean that you engage workers and their representatives from the very beginning, even about how you talk to them. Not just sort of blast and I've got these ideas, can we talk about this? No. How should we talk about health and safety here? Let's try and get an agreement around the best way of talking about health and safety. I suspect that a lot of organisations don't really do that. They just design it and then just impose it on their staff. So we're going to talk about health and safety. This is the times when we're going to do it. This is when it suits me. Come here and listen to me when I'm ready to talk to you, because that's sort of an old way of doing things. This would suggest that you should even talk about workers about how you're going to engage them. And then obviously go through a process of engaging your staff in the identification of hazards and risks together. Because the people who do the job almost usually know more about the job than anybody else. Certainly management will never know as much as management and worker together. It's impossible, unless workers always know less than nothing, and they obviously don't. So 1 plus or whatever is always going to be more than just 1. And finally, this important idea is to engage workers in the development of solutions together. Not, I heard what you're going to say, heard what your views are, yeah, I got it, I'll go away and figure out what the answer is and tell you what it is. That's not engagement. Much better to do it this way. Now, what I wanted to just show you was a couple of slides around high engagement. And these slides actually aren't slides that are directed just at health and safety. They're actually directed at organisations that unions are working with to create a culture of high engagement. Because pretty well every organisation I've ever met, chief executives go, do we care about engagement? It's our number one thing. We score ourselves on it. We know that we can't succeed without high engagement. But I would say pretty well every company that I know, most companies, the vast majority, can't do it. They can do it for a little while. They can do it in a little pocket, but to genuinely create a whole organisational culture, particularly a large organisation, which is truly high, what you classify as high engagement, I don't think we do well in New Zealand, and I think we've got a long way to go. And high engagement, I would say, is found in open, high-trust cultures. The antithesis of low-trust, sort of command and control cultures. Places where employees are trusted to sort of get on with the job, and the job of management is to help them get on with the job. The job of management is not to tell them what to do all the time. It's basically to help them get the job done. That's a big change from the way businesses are traditionally organised, and it's where high-performing companies are going to. It involves everyone being able, encouraged and supported to speak up. So I say this to some people in some large organisations. The chief executives go, hey, my staff all know they can send me an email. I'll put out a thing to all the staff saying, if you've got a good idea, send it to me. They know that it's free and easy here and that's high engagement. That isn't high engagement. You might think, if you're a chief executive, that your staff know they can come to you whenever they feel like they've got an idea, but I tell you, they don't think that. Particularly if they're in an organisation where they don't feel encouraged, incredibly safe. People in organisations where they don't feel terribly safe, they just say in their heads, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's how I keep safe. You think of any culture where you don't have high trust and you have a place where people don't feel all that supported and safe. It could be a family, where you have a dominant personality, probably a father, who sort of basically, what's going on around here. What do kids do? Just what they're told. Nothing else, just what they're told. You think of a country, Soviet Union, fascism, whatever, people just keep safe, don't they? So what we would say is try and create a culture in your workplace that is open. I would call it democratic. But, open, has ideas, encourages people to speak up without any negative, but actually people see it as their responsibility. I'd suggest to you that's an incredibly hard thing to do, to create a culture like that, especially if you've never had it before and it's not the way we generally do business in New Zealand. It relies on a high engagement culture, consensus as far as possible. Companies that are moving to high performance, high engagement try to get as many decisions made by consensus as possible. That of course doesn't mean you need to get consensus over every last little thing you do, but the more consensus you have on as many things as you can get, the higher buy-in you'll have, because it's everybody's idea and we all agreed. If you impose your will on your staff or on the people you work with and they don't agree with you, I knew it'd never work. Passive-aggressive behaviour. All right, I'll just shut up. I know it'll never work. I'm not going to contribute myself to it. But if you create a culture where people are really expected to say, well, do you think this is going to work or not? Are you with us or not? If you have that kind of culture, I think you can see it's a whole different ballgame, and that can be created in the workplace. It needs to be structured, systematic, targeted and measured. In other words, it needs to be built into the way that you do things, which is what a culture is. It needs to be, you need to know who's there to do it, when you do it, how often you do it, what you're aiming for and what you're measuring. These are very, very simplistic slides, by the way, because to have all of that, all of your staff need to know a lot more information about what it is they're trying to achieve on their job. They need to be aware of how their work contributes to the overall goals of the organisation. And the final point there is, it has to be learned. You can't just, as I say, send out a memo or send out an article saying, this is neat. I read it. I went to this Safety Rebel charter and I photocopied the slides that Richard showed and just do this. It won't work. It absolutely won't work. And where we're doing this kind of thing in organisations, people are doing actually quite intensive training. I don't mean a few people. I don't mean just the union delegates or management. I mean everybody. You have to teach everybody how to talk to each other. And it takes a little bit of time. It's not 5 minutes. I reckon it takes a couple of days training to teach everybody, not just about health and safety. Because one of the things about high engagement is, I don't see how you can create a culture at work where you go, right, okay everyone, I know I don't want to listen to a bloody thing you've got to say, but we're talking about health and safety now, so tell me what's going on here. And I'll just suspend the way I normally work, and as soon as this chat's over, I'm going to go back into basically telling you what you have to do all the time, and you're doing what you're told, unless you've got a damn good excuse. You can't just separate those two. And so this does represent an enormous challenge to what I think we can do if we really apply our minds to it. So high engagement is not simply, I put simply on the end there in case people thought, what do you mean? But it's not just communicating to your employees if you're a manager, just telling them what you're thinking and doing. That's not high engagement. That's just one-way traffic. It's not even just asking people for their ideas or opinions in a completely unstructured way. Just send me an email if you've got an idea. That's not high engagement. It's not creating a place where everyone's actually bouncing off each other in a structured way where they've learned how to contribute, where they've learned how to analyse their work, analyse their hazards and put it together in a team. It's not consulting or asking for feedback when a solution is already developed, the old style. It's not the boss saying, I know how we're going to fix this problem, this is what we're going to do, what do you guys think? Do you agree with that? That's not high engagement. It's not even defining the problem and asking for the solution. It's not management coming along and saying, I can see what the problem is, it's this, it's whatever it is, this is too hot and it's going to burn everyone. That's what the problem is. If you've got any ideas about it, I'll leave it with you. If you've got any ideas how to fix it, that's not high engagement. High engagement is when the staff themselves identify the problem and come up with solutions and can keep trying to fix the solutions that they came up with. They absolutely work with their managers, and but their manager resists trying to disempower them by telling them what to do all the time. The manager tries to be more Socratic by saying, the CTU pretty hot. What do you think is causing this? And more basically there to help them get the job done. And it's not excluding union representatives from the engagement process. If you say, we want a high trust culture here, but hey, keep your representatives out, I would suggest to you, you haven't really got a culture where people are free to speak up. That suggests to them that you don't want to hear from them and you don't want a relationship where you can get that kind of pushback. Because actually, I would say a high engagement culture involves welcoming pushback. But if you say keep your union outside, I'd say you probably don't want pushback. So finally, you can't just communicate your way to high engagement. So I'm showing these slides to you for us to reflect. I haven't got a silver bullet here. I would have some ideas if we had more time and, and resources. But really, I think we all know it. How do you really get people to really bring themselves to a conversation in an environment with their colleagues where they really are on the issue, present, not just keeping themselves safe or getting to the payday or just get this out of the way and I'll go back to my job, what I like doing, but really owning it and seeing it as their solution. Because actually, from a union point of view, high engagement, of course, if it creates a more safer workplace, is something we really want. It actually creates far higher performance in an organisation. But from my point of view, it actually makes a hell of a lot better because it's where people become far more. They have a greater sense of self-esteem, of responsibility, of value and all of those things if they're actually listened to and people want to talk to them. So the final slide is actually stolen from the Safety Charter Rebuild, but it's just reinforcing the point that this way of working, engagement, will actually deliver on the bottom line if that's your motivation. It will deliver on the bottom line of creating a better place to work if that's my motivation. It will deliver on the bottom line of reducing harm and accidents because you create a culture of work where people aren't feeling like they're just there to do what they're told. They're actually there thinking, this is my workplace and we have been taught how to work together to actually make the place run better and to be safer. Thank you. Thanks.